I'm not really using much of any salt now. So yeah, it's mostly beef. So almost always it's just steaks. I'll just cut up salt steak. I just eat intuitively. I always think of it, like nature. Animals, they know when to eat and they know when not to eat. You're starving to death and you don't have access to meat, and then you eat whatever plant material is around in order to survive. That actually gives a huge survival advantage. He was talking about using keto as a treatment model for autism. So I live in that second wind. I'm always on my runner's high.
All right, guys. So I'm delighted today to be here with Dr. Anthony Chaffee. He's been someone I've been following for quite a while now in the online YouTube carnivore community. He's got some excellent insights. I like his approach because he's been very consistent with what he says. Some people in the industry say different things at different times. We're not going to go into that in this sort of interview, but I don't really need to introduce him. He is who he is. He's a great guy. He's got, like I said, excellent insights. And I want to ask him a few sort of quick fire questions. Hopefully they won't throw him off. Anyway, so the first question is, could you briefly outline your diet?
Yeah, really. So all I eat is just meat and water. So some salt to taste. I'm using less and less as I go, actually. And so I'm not really using much of any salt now. So yeah, it's mostly beef. So almost always it's just steaks. I'll just cut up salt steaks. If I'm going to use salt, put them on drying racks, let them dry out for a bit. Then just every day grab a big steak or two if I'm feeling that way, and go from there. So that's it, just meat and water.
I'm quite happy just frying up some beef mince, some ground beef, just having that, put a bit of salt on it, done. I don't, your appeal for all these different weird foods it just diminishes over time. And it's hard for someone to watch someone like Dr. Anthony Chaffee and say, how are you doing that? But honestly, as time goes by, your taste for these things does diminish, and you just get down to proper human diet. So brilliant. So my next question is on your dietary intake, specifically tracking. So is it that you follow more of an intuitive approach, so maybe 1 or 2 steaks a day or 3? Or is it that you track things to say, okay, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I'm going to eat this, 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 and this?
Yeah, exactly. So I just eat intuitively. I always think of it, like nature. Animals, they know when to eat and they know when not to eat, and there's something natural in there that tells them that. So if you're eating what you're biologically supposed to eat, you should be able to listen to your satiation signals and your hunger signals, which will change depending on what you eat, actually. So you eat carbohydrates to make you think you're hungry when you're actually not, cause you to overeat. So when you're eating when you're supposed to eat, you should be able to eat intuitively, and I think that's a very good sign that you are eating the right thing. So yeah, I just eat meat until it tastes, while it tastes good. And I think that's a good feedback. You're giving a positive feedback. Your body's saying, hey, we want these nutrients. Obviously not, sugar tastes good too. That's a bit of an outlier. And we become accustomed to certain things, like the taste of, Scotch whiskey. That's obviously not like, objectively a good taste though. But I find that when you're eating that meat, it tastes really good when you're hungry and your body wants those nutrients. And then as you go, it doesn't taste as good. And eventually it will actually taste bad if you're trying to force yourself to eat when you're not hungry. So I just listen to that. So I always just eat when meat tastes good. And if it tastes good, I keep eating it. And if I get done with the steak, but I think like, wow, I really actually want some more, I'll cook some more. And so I try to cook more than I think I'm going to want, just to make sure that my body's getting everything it needs. And that will change depending on what I'm doing. If I'm working out a lot, then I'll definitely eat, more than once a day. Usually if I'm just doing sedentary, just, work at the hospital, then it's usually once a day. It's enough.
Yes, fair enough. That's aligned with what I think, to be honest. It might be that my time permits 2 meals per day, so I might just do 2 meals. That's an exception to the norm, but I'm doing probably around 4 or 5 meals a day, and that's what I like to do. That's me. That's what I like to do. You're not wrong by doing 2 meals, 1 meal, 5. It's just what fits into your schedule. So that it has to be applicable to what you're trying to do. So the next question is about plants, not foods. So we get pushback from people online mentioning how some plants are really beneficial for people that are following different diets. So what is your take on this matter, in considering epigenetics, proximity to the equator, things like that? So is there any case when someone might include carbohydrates and plant foods more or not?
I think really the only reasonable way is if you're starving to death and you don't have access to meat, and then you eat whatever plant material is around in order to survive. That actually gives a huge survival advantage, being able to do that. Not all animals can do that. You look at like any felines, like they will really struggle with any plant matter that they eat. They could actually die. There was even a study I was looking at in the night. I think it was the 1920s and 30s. They're looking at Pottinger's cats, yeah, and they had they actually had cats with cooked meat versus raw meat, and just the cooked meat ones were doing far less well. And actually, after 3 generations, they became sterile, and their bone mineral density was very low. They're like spongy bones, having a lot of fractures. So it makes a big difference depending on what you eat. We're not that sensitive. We can get more out of less optimal things than a cat can, and that has given us a survival advantage. However, if you look at native populations, and you can look at the historical record, with the European explorers going to North America and Australia and elsewhere, they found that basically predominantly people were just eating meat. When they didn't have access to meat, they couldn't get a hunt or whatever, they knew which plants that they could eat safely to survive on. But when they got meat, that's all they ate. Plants have defense chemicals in them just to stop animals and insects and pathogens, fungus, to stop them from eating them. And like nature's wild, it's kill or be killed for plants as well as animals, and so everything has a defense. And an animal's defense is more kinetic. They can run away, they can fight back, they can hide. A plant can't move, and so it has to have other defenses set up, and they have a lot of very interesting defenses actually. But one of them that you'll find throughout the entire plant kingdom is growing these defense chemicals and being poisonous, and even binding up their nutrients in tight bonds that we can't, or other animals aren't able to get out very effectively. This is where bioavailability comes in. Like corn has a ton of thiamine. You cannot access it. You will not get out basically any thiamine from corn, even though there's a ton of it. But through chemical processes, you can start extracting that, but you have to do something to it. So that doesn't make any sense evolutionarily. Like we should have the hardware to break down and extract, or break down these defense chemicals and extract the nutrients, just like other herbivores do, but we can't. So I think that, like you say, they're not food. I think food is very species specific, and so like a koala's food is eucalyptus, a panda's food is bamboo, a lion's food is other animals, right? And I think that applies to us as well. I don't think that we just got dropped here from space, or some other place that just, and we're just some sort of invasive species and the rules don't apply to us. We're animals, and the biological rules apply to us, and so we have some sort of species specific diet that is appropriate to us. I argue that it's a carnivore diet, just exclusively meat, because of the defense chemicals and so forth. But it is something, and so you can't just eat any random thing. Even if we were designed to eat certain plants, we certainly were not designed to eat all the plants that we do now. Look at any animal in the wild who eats plants. They do not eat a huge, massive variety of plants. They eat something in the same family because it has those similar defense chemicals. Maybe they only eat one thing, like pandas and koalas and other things.
So I have a question about the carnivore diet and hydration. So you've spoken to a few different people recently about deuterium, you know a great deal about that. How did your diet change over time? And in that time, did your water intake decrease, increase? What have you noticed about that? Is it intuitive?
I still do it intuitively. I still do feel better with more water. The deuterium thing is throwing a bit of a wrench in my gears, just because it is something. I mean, it actually does make sense from a molecular biology point of view. And I've spoken to a couple, very serious professors. One was a professor of pediatrics at UCLA Medical School, and ran a large biochemistry lab at UCLA for decades. And now he's a professor of deuteronomics over in Hungary. He's from Hungary originally, which is just the study of deuterium. I'm probably mispronouncing whatever that was, like deuterology, something like that. But anyway, studying deuterium, and so he's actually teaching us now. Sorry. Yeah, something. And so it's it is very interesting. And if that's something, people haven't looked at, look up, people like Dr. Laszlo Boros and Dr. Gabor Somlai. I have Somlai's interview up on my channel, and I'm going to be releasing Dr. Laszlo Boros's in the next sort of week or two. Super interesting. And it really matters how much deuterium is in your body, because it can actually damage your cells, and specifically your mitochondria. It's becoming more and more apparent that just all of these diseases come down to the dysfunction of the mitochondria. Cancer, even schizophrenia, bipolar, depression, all these things come from a disruption of the biomechanical functions of your mitochondria and in their ability to produce energy. Deuterium messes that up. So there's a lot of deuterium in water, but there's varying amounts. Rainwater is like deuterium deplete. It's like there's no deuterium. And so if you're collecting rainwater and drinking that, you're getting no deuterium. It actually costs a lot to get like lower deuterium water, because it's a difficult process. That the boiling rate of water versus deuterium water is nearly identical. It's very different. So you have to be very exacting equipment to sort of just boil off the light water as opposed to the heavy water. So that's a difficult process. Rainwater just does that for you. So if you just collect that and just drink your rainwater, I mean, this is like just historically, you think back when people talk about, oh, they only drink rainwater and it's so good for them. And you think that, well, maybe it's because of the, bacteria and parasites that are in, creek water, but it might be more than that. It's kind of interesting. And then in different latitudes, if you go up north or very far south towards the poles, there's just going to be less deuterium there. And so the deuterium rainwater will come down, goes in the highlands and stays up there. And you have, there's going to be less deuterium in the highlands, in the soil, just because of that. So if you have like a Highland cow up north of Scotland, probably going to be pretty low deuterium meat that you're getting. And so, that's something as well. And then, you also make water. It's called molecular water. When your mitochondria are using ketones to produce energy and ATP, one of the byproducts is water that is deuterium free. The mitochondria have filtered out the deuterium. It's like get away, and actually can damage it by filtering it out. And so now you have, you're creating, for every kilo of fat that you burn, you will produce about a liter of deuterium free water. Kind of cool. And I have noticed that I don't drink as much water. I don't need as much water, but I still drink intuitively. I still do drink a good amount of water. I don't know. I'll probably figure out how to collect rainwater at some point and then go from there. But at the moment, that's what I do, is I still drink intuitively, and I do feel better. I do feel better especially when I'm working out a lot. I feel better with more hydration.
Yeah, I can see how that'd be applicable. I mean, someone that's trying to deplete deuterium and they're deliberately not drinking water, they might end up in hospital. So, there's intuitiveness.
They could. Yeah. There's some people that do, dry fast. When I was talking to Laszlo, he was saying, he's just like, yeah, I haven't drank water in 4 days. I'm like, what? He says every time, sometimes he'll get thirsty, he'll actually go for a walk or he'll do some exercise, because that makes his mitochondria burn some fat and make water. It's a good concept. Or he'll like take a mouthful of tallow, and just grass-fed tallow, and he'll just, just have let that soak in for a while. And he says that, this guy's a professor of medicine at UCLA. I mean, he's not a dumb guy, and he was actually quite, he didn't buy into the whole deuterium thing. When people were talking to him about it, they're like, no, this is the way. And they're like, you should do some research on it. And he's just like, probably not gonna. He's like, like he just didn't think it was worth his time. And so he said, well, if you want me to do that research, like, it costs money. These cell lines cost money. It's like, if you want me to do it, it's 25 grand per cell line. And this was like 20 years ago. And so they came back and said, right, we'll take 3. There's 75 grand cash. And you're like, okay, these guys are serious. And then he actually did the studies and he went, holy crap, these guys are right. There is something here. And then he really started, digging into it and researching this. So very interesting stuff. But I think at the moment, you will lower your deuterium just by being in ketosis, because you'll be running on carbohydrates, bang up your deuterium, and just go eating just meat and fat and running on the fat, you'll actually excrete out the deuterium, and the molecular water that you keep will be lighter deuterium. So your overall deuterium parts per million will be much lower.
Yeah, it's a brilliant concept, and it does seem to work. I mean, I'm someone that used to drink around 9-10 liters a day, sometimes more. Now I'm drinking around 2 to 2.5. Bear in mind, my energy intake is roughly the same, and my energy expenditure is roughly the same. So there's something to it. It's definitely a thing there, I have a question as well. It's about the carnivore diet as a whole. So when people start their diet, they have these issues. How do you think they happen, and what is misunderstood about starting the carnivore diet?
Well, I mean, there can be a lot of common pitfalls. I did a video called Carnivore for Beginners, starting out on carnivore, that sort of try to address that and try to sort of just help people, just give them a bit of a guide to how to get going. And I think a lot of times, people think of carnivore as, well, I'm just going to eat a lot more meat, right? And that's probably why people thought that Liver King was carnivore. And people say that, well, now is it, he's fake, so is everyone else fake too? Is this really a good way of doing it? Well, he was never really carnivore. He was drinking maple syrup, for God's sake. Like that's not a carnivore diet. A carnivore diet is really eliminating out all non-meat things and really just eating meat. And so a lot of people will just eat more meat, but they'll still be eating other things. They'll still be having sweets or artificial sweeteners or even sugar like maple syrup. And it will be a problem for them. They won't really get good results, and they'll get discouraged, and they'll go off of it. So I think it's really important to really do it right and really just focus on just eating meat and drinking water and leaving everything else to the side. My hard rule is, I think it's just as important what not to eat as what to eat. And so my hard rule is no plants, no sugar, nothing artificial. And that would go for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So that's, first of all, is just defining our terms and just getting on track from the beginning. And then another thing is, like I mentioned, your hunger signals change dramatically when you're not eating carbohydrates. When your blood sugar goes up, like we said, your insulin goes up. Insulin derails your metabolic system and a lot of processes in your body, actually. One of those is your hunger signals. Leptin is secreted by stretch receptors in your stomach when you're full, but mostly it comes from your fat cells. And that goes up to your brain and tells your brain how much energy you have, just like a gas tank in your car. And so now you're blocking that with insulin. So now it looks like your gas tank's on empty all the time, and you're freaking out. And you're like, oh my God, do I need to stop for gas? And that's what your brain is thinking. And now your blood sugar is dropping too, because your insulin stays up for like 24 hours. And so your brain looks at this and gets a signal that you have zero energy reserves and your blood sugar is dropping. So you get a panic signal that says, if you don't eat now, you will die. And so you eat and you eat and you overeat. When you're not eating carbs and sugar, you're not getting these pathological signals that you're starving to death and you have to eat. So hunger feels very different, and it's much more subtle, and you have to relearn your hunger signals. That's why I go by taste. If meat tastes good, your body's giving you a positive feedback, says, eat more of this. This is good for you. It will stop tasting good. And I even have patients that, maybe they have a lot of weight to lose. They've been eating massive portions for a long time. And they're just like, I say, you can eat as much as you want. I tell them that you should eat only when it tastes good, but they sort of just hear you can eat as much as you want sort of thing. So they make a big portion, and then they get partway through it and their body goes, stop eating right now. And they just keep going and it stops tasting good. And they say, I hate it. I hate this diet. I hate it. It just tastes horrible. I hate eating meat. And I ask them, I was like, well, does it always taste horrible? Or did it taste horrible at the beginning? And some of them, like, begrudgingly will admit that, well, actually it tasted really good. But then halfway through, it stopped tasting good and they had to force feed themselves to go through. And I said, of course, that's your body telling you that you don't need to eat it, that you're done and that you should stop. And that's where that intuition comes from. Your body is telling you in no uncertain terms, stop eating, because you're saying, I don't enjoy this. I don't want to do this. Okay, so don't do it. But that's when you should stop. And so that's something that I think is something people should need to know about, is that your hunger signals will be dramatically different, and you have to relearn those, and you have to make sure you're eating enough and not forcing yourself to eat when you shouldn't. I think those are major ones. And then sweets. So many people, keep artificial sweeteners, usually like in coffee, which is a plant. So, I don't drink it, but, so a lot of people have coffee, or they'll have artificial sweeteners usually in the coffee. And that can disrupt what you're doing here. You'll be a lot better. You're going to be getting a lot of meat. You're going to be feeling a lot better. You're going to be getting rid of a lot of things that are bad for you. But artificial sweeteners, for those who don't know, that actually causes, quite a lot of havoc in your body. And there's a lot of people that can attest to that. They've eliminated everything else except the artificial sweeteners, and they can see, like, okay, there's nothing else going on here. It's just the sweeteners, and things are going wrong. And then they cut those out, and they have like horrible withdrawal, like heroin withdrawals. They just feel miserable for days. And some people just can't get through it. So they start eating the artificial sweeteners again. That's a bad sign. That's a good sign that you don't want that in your body. And so you want to get through those 4 days, 5 days of feeling pretty crummy if you're very addicted. But that it does go away, and then you get off it, and you be on the other side. So I've seen this in practice, and I'm sure that people can find a study. You can find a study that says anything, but concludes that artificial sweeteners aren't bad based on some certain endpoints that they chose that I don't care about, because what I care about is how I feel and how my body's performing, and that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm seeing in patients. So I think those are big ones. Is not knowing exactly what to eat, sort of just eating more meat, not eating enough necessarily, not understanding how hunger is going to change, and then just including artificial sweeteners. That seems to plague a lot of people that are trying to start on a carnivore diet. So, like, first of all, when people talk about, like, what our brain is supposed to run on, what our primary fuel source is, they'll normally say it's glucose, just because when you're in a so-called fed state, you run on glucose, your brain is primarily running on glucose. But I disagree with that definition. I don't think that that's I don't think that's a fed state. I think that's actually a pathological defense mechanism where we're eating, outside exogenous carbohydrates, and that actually causes harm, because when your blood sugar goes up, that actually damages you physically. The glucose molecules physically fuse to other molecules, and they damage them. And so your body defends you by raising your insulin, tries to get that and get your blood sugar down as quickly as possible. So when you don't eat carbohydrates, that doesn't happen. When your insulin goes up, it derails your entire metabolism, and things change dramatically. You force energy into cells. It doesn't allow it to come out of cells. You block lipolysis. You block proteolysis. You cannot access your fat stores anymore, which doesn't make any sense. So when you're in the so-called fasting state, which I think is our primary metabolic state, that's where all of your heavy machinery comes to bear, and you can make ketones, blood sugar, liver glycogen, muscle glycogen, and you run much better for that. And when you're in that state, actually, when you have high enough ketones, your brain runs exclusively on ketones. And so even when you have an abundance of glucose, but you have enough ketones, it'll actually switch and only run on ketones. So that tells you there's a preferential use of ketones in your brain. And so when you're in ketosis, that's going to make your brain run better. And there have been studies with Alzheimer's patients, just putting them on a ketogenic diet, a high-fat ketogenic diet, not even necessarily carnivore, but just high-fat, meat-based, keto diet. And it showed better efficacy in treating Alzheimer's than every medication ever trialed for Alzheimer's. So that's significant. There are studies showing that in TBI, traumatic brain injury, and stroke, that people going on a ketogenic diet is actually neuroprotective, and it actually helps you heal and recover from these injuries more. Ketones are neuroprotective. They actually help your brain. They also are able to cross the blood-brain barrier and then reconstitute into fatty acids, which is what your brain is made out of. And so that helps regrow and rebuild your brain. So it's very, very important. Another thing is autism. There was a causative study. There's a lot of associative studies with meat. Women who eat, more red meat and just animal products before conception have lower rates of kids with autism. Women who breastfeed instead of bottle feed have lower rates of kids with autism. Women who have higher LDL cholesterol and more saturated fat intake during pregnancy, lower rates of kids with autism. So those are associative, and those are interesting. But there's a causative study as well that that the University of Texas A&M did, and they showed that vegans, vegetarians have a much higher rate of children with autism, and they found the reason for that, which was carnitine. So if you don't get enough carnitine, you can't develop your brain properly. Your neurons won't develop properly. You have to have carnitine. You have to have a lot of things. Carnitine is one of them. And so when you don't have enough, you won't develop your brain properly. Your neurons will be malformed, and your brain will be malformed, and you'll have, this form of autism. There are different kinds of autism, different causes of autism. And so most people will make carnitine, or they'll make enough of it anyway. It's actually still good to get carnitine in your food as well, even if you make enough of it. But some people don't, and some people don't make enough, or they don't make any at all. And this used to not be a problem, didn't used to be seen in the population, because everyone was eating meat if they could afford to. And so there were very low rates of autism. Now there's sky high rates, and it's going up, which, makes you think, okay, what's happening? What's changing? It's not our genetics. This is going up, and it's dynamically changing. So when you're eating any diet, right, carnitine only exists in animal products, right? So like meat and dairy. It does not exist in plants. It does not exist in fungi, right? So you have to eat meat in order to get carnitine. So if you don't make any, you have to eat meat, and you have to eat meat that has a lot of carnitine. That's red meat. Red meat has a ton of carnitine. And so what's the first thing that vegetarians do? They drop red meat, because that's the worst, right? Well, in fact, it's the best. And so they drop that. And if their kids aren't making enough carnitine or any at all, then they're going to get this kind of autism. They'll have a deficiency, even if they're eating chicken and eggs or something like that. And then vegans that are having absolutely no animal products at all, if their kid is even slightly deficient at making carnitine, they will also have a deficiency, and their brain won't develop properly, which I don't think is right to do for your child. I think that whatever your ethical dilemmas are with eating meat, I think that your child supersedes all of those. And that's just, my personal view, but I feel that it's right. So there are absolutely tons of things that show that your brain is made out of very long chain fatty acids, 20 and 22 chain fatty acids. Those don't exist in the plant or fungus kingdom, right? You have to have them. We don't make them. We make a bit of them. We don't really make it very well ourselves. 70% of the solid mass of your brain is fat. 20% of that fat is DHA. That does not exist in plants or fungus. We don't make it ourselves. We have to get it from the food that you eat. So it's very, very important what you eat for your brain health.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm glad you touched on those points, actually. Myself, just my anecdotal experience. My mother doesn't eat red meat much. I am autistic. So go figure.
Okay.
That's how it works, I guess. So you brought up a really good point there. But I can say that the diet has significantly improved my symptoms. Now, someone said on an interview you did a while ago about autism and this and the other, and you weren't saying that it cures autism, but you're saying the symptoms will be alleviated somewhat to some degree. So I'm someone that can say from experience, yes.
Well, oh, very good. I didn't know that, and that's awesome. That's really great. I mean, that's the thing. I guess it matters when you catch it, right? I mean, when your brain's still developing, you can probably reverse a lot of damage. Well, it's not even reversing damage. It's just allowing the brain to develop. And so it's depending on if your brain's still developing and you start getting on red meat and you start getting rid of these things that maybe interfere with that, then that can have benefits. And then later on, like I was saying with the ketones, if you just go on ketones, your brain's just going to run and work better no matter what. And there are a number of studies, and there's a number of actual groups that treat autism with a ketogenic diet, not even necessarily a carnivore diet, but just a high fat ketogenic diet. And they're finding that they're getting extremely good results of this. I read a paper that sort of took all the data and just was talking about using keto as a treatment model for autism, and which was very good to see. And that was a thing too. I think there's something to do with sugar and carbohydrates that sort of get in the way of people that are susceptible to autism, because even like that's what I was looking at with those studies with mothers that breastfed versus bottle fed, because a lot of women do pump and they'll give their breast milk to kids in a bottle. The majority of people who bottle feed are using formula, and a lot of those formulas are heavy in sugar. And so depending on the formula that you get, and so and that's what I was wondering, is there something to do with sugar? And that was what I came up with. I was like, well, maybe there's something in the literature that sort of shows that, and I think that suggests that anyway. And then there's these treatment groups that are using this as a treatment modality for people with autism, and it seems to help. And so I think that at least changing the brain energy over to what it's supposed to be running on is going to make a significant difference. And then also potentially there's something else that the carbohydrates are doing that sort of get in the way. But either way, I think there's a lot of evidence that things are helping, and that's and you're living proof of that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it is quite tremendous. I mean, having this conversation now 1 year ago would not have been possible. That's the point where maybe I was a bit flaky with the diet. As time has gone on, I've been more consistent. The results are dramatic. Everyone that knows on a personal level will say, you're much better now. You're less moody. You're more balanced. You're better to be around. So I feel a lot more at ease around people. Like talking to you, it's so much more easy now. So I want to be an advocate for people or autistic, and you're putting out great information. So I'm so glad that your thoughts align with what I'm thinking. So yeah, brilliant. So I have a question.
That's great, man. Yeah.
Cheers. Yeah. So I've got questions now about training, sports performance, all that sort of thing. So is there a key sort of benefit that you've noticed since being on the carnivore diet versus, if you fall off the rails sort of thing? Is there an obvious thing, my performance is better in this way, or composition, or whatever it is?
Well, it's a lot easier to stay in shape, and it's a lot easier to keep my body fat percentage low and maintain muscle mass. So, I mean, I haven't really worked out consistently. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but I have not worked out consistently for a full year now. It was actually end of October last year that I started traveling. I was in lockdown, and I sort of just fell out of my gym routine, and I never really got back into it. And it was like sort of, once every week or two, maybe I'd do a gym session, and sometimes not even that. And so I haven't been consistent. I still do work out sometimes, but it hasn't been as consistent as I'd like it to be. And yet I maintain my body fat percentage, and I maintain a lot of musculature. I'm not as big as I would have been. I probably, I think I'm like 103, 105 kilos now, whereas like then I would have been 110, and like, so, and my body fat percentage just stays low. And that's just from eating intuitively. I just eat what tastes good, and it just works itself out. I'm not counting macros. So that's great. When I'm working out, I feel much better, and I can go longer. My recoveries are much quicker, and I can push myself a lot harder. I don't get gassed out. And in fact, the more I go, the more better I feel. I want to keep going. That's tough for me because I don't have much time. And so, sometimes I'll get caught in there, and I really don't want to like leave the gym, but that's better as well. I don't get sore anymore. It doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't matter how hard I train. I won't be sore the next day because it's those inflammatory factors and defense chemicals in plants that are actually making you sore. And everyone thinks it's just like, oh, they get so mad at that when I say that. Like, there's bullshit. There's no way. Just try it. I mean, it's so easy. Just don't eat plants for 2 weeks, and you'll see. Once that stuff gets out of your system, you will not get sore. It doesn't matter how hard you work, or how long it's been since you worked. So that's great as well. And then I think the biggest difference is my exercise tolerance. I literally can just keep going because I'm tapped into my fat stores. I'm not just running on my blood sugar and liver glycogen. And so when you run out of that glycogen, you'll hit the wall and you'll tank out. And that's what people say, you push, and then you hit the wall and you don't feel good. And that's when you run out of glycogen and blood sugar. And so that's down because your insulin's up. You can't access your fat stores. And so you can't replenish your blood sugar and your glycogen, so you can't lift it back up. So you feel rotten and you stop. That's where most people stop. Endurance athletes, anyone playing like an endurance sport or running a marathon or something like that, they know that you hit that wall and you have to keep pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing. And if you push through and you break through the wall, then you'll get to your second wind, your runner's high, and then you can just go forever and just feel amazing. Well, what that is biochemically is instead of waiting for 24 hours for your insulin to come down, you can actually force your body to start actually producing energy and tapping into your fat stores. And when you do that, now you just feel amazing. So, the more energy you burn, the better you feel. This is why we drink caffeine. This is why we take stimulants and pre-workout, because you feel better when you're burning more energy. So now the harder you work, the more energy you burn, the better you feel, the harder you want to work, and the better you feel. And so it's this positive feedback loop. So I live in that second win. I'm always on my runner's high. So I don't take pre-workout so that I can get energy so that I can go to the gym. I go to the gym so that I can work out, so I can get energy and feel amazing, and then, crush a massive workout. So I think that's definitely for me. I mean, it's just crazy the difference that is. I mean, I can just go and go and go and push myself. But I mean, you have fitness, I'm not saying that just overnight just turns you into like a marathon runner. You have to work at it. Your muscles you will get tired, you will get winded, but you won't run out of energy. And so you can actually keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. And once you get fit, I mean, then you can really just take off. I mean, there was a point that I was in insane shape, and I always thought I could just literally sprint a marathon, and without really even getting too much tired from it. So you can really, 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 really push yourself, and your body just gives you 1,000 times more than you've ever thought it could.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, I can speak from this myself, to be honest. This interview's about you, but I can agree completely with what you say. It does definitely elevate your performance and your physique and your ability to maintain that good physique. It really is much easier. So my next question, I have two left, I think. So is about the X3 bar. So you're gonna like talking about this one, I think. What are the pros and cons to it? I'm getting asked a lot about it. That's why I'm asking you.
The pros are that it's very, very quick. You get a very good intense workout, and you can really fatigue your muscles. And it's good because I like the idea of that variable resistance, where you are much stronger out here than you are in here. But obviously, you can only do a bench press that you can get off your chest, right? And this is why some people won't actually even go down to their chest. They'll just go down to 90 degrees and then up, right? And you can stack on an extra 40 kilos if you do that, pretty quick. So you can do that as a sort of a cheat. And some people do that if they're just going for a physique side of thing, as opposed to, I don't even know if it works in like, actual physique, bodybuilding, but just gym bros and want to look big, they can do that little sort of cheat, and they can go up weights faster. So you have to sort of, go on a lower weight here just to do that. And then it's way too light when you're up here, right? Whereas the variable resistance, it's sort of at a decent pressure here, and it's way harder once you get up there. And so that's good. I like that side of things. And then you're going and you start wearing yourself out, and you can only do sort of half press, quarter press, and you just sort of eke out a few more of those. It really, gets a good burn. And I like that. And it's kind of cool. You're only doing one set. It's still hard for me to get my head around. Like normally I'm doing like 20 sets of bench and 20 sets of squats because I can, and I have that recovery when I'm on carnivore. I wouldn't do that before, but now that I'm on carnivore, like I was literally doing 20 sets of bench, 20 sets of shoulders, 20 sets of squats, 20 sets of deadlift. And I don't have the time for that anymore. That was when I was back in the States before I came to Australia, when I was taking some time off. And so that's something that's is interesting. And so you can get through like an entire, they set it up by push days and pull days. And so you can get through like a whole pull day or a push day in like 10, 15 minutes, really working hard. And so that's a big advantage. And I think it does give a very good workout as well. I think for me, I actually really enjoy going to the gym, and I actually really enjoy the atmosphere. I enjoy being there. I enjoy like putting in a lot of hard work. And I think that's a bit of motivation for me as well, because like I said, when I go to the gym and I work hard, I like that. And it makes me feel better. And that's a drive for me to go there and work hard. So the X3 bar, because it's so quick and dirty, it's sort of almost just like, you kind of like, you almost feel like it's you're not satisfied, even though you've worked out very hard. For me, I don't know. I'm weird. I like being in the gym for 2 hours, just working my ass off. So it's a bit of adjustment for that. But I think as far as like actual results, I think it does a fantastic job. And so even if I go to the gym, I'll do stuff with my X3 bar as well, and use both. The other thing is that you can get a lot of the compound lifts, and you get a lot of the major muscle groups, but you can only do certain things just based on the limitations of the design, which are actually not that limited. You can do basically everything, but if you wanted, to get your hip abductors and adductors and things like that, like you're not doing that on X3 bar, you have to do that somewhere else. And so that's probably the only other thing too, is that, for someone who's, who wants to do all those sorts of extra lifts and and hit different muscle groups in different ways, like we would probably have to at least get some free weights, if not, access to a gym where you had a specific machine that did something that you want. But as far as like just the major lifts and the compound movements, it does a great job.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I was thinking along the same sort of thing. I don't own one myself because I go to a gym and I have an hour or two each day to actually be able to gym a few times a week. So I just do that.
That's great.
Yeah. So you're a former rugby player, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we had this conversation before, and off camera we had some similar views about things like what we want to do, how we want to take our brands, and how we're going to promote the diet. So what is it that you're looking to do, maybe short and long term in the future? So is it you're going to focus entirely on YouTube? Are you going to try and get an 8-pack or build your shoulders up or whatever it is? What are the goals?
Yeah. I don't know. We got a power vacuum now with Liver King being discredited. So maybe I just got to get like super jacked and start, wearing furs and throwing spears or something like that, and just take over the role. Yeah. But no, I just, my whole reason for getting involved in this in the first place was just because I really believe in it. I've seen a lot of evidence, a lot of studies, a lot of information that really tell me that this is the best way for us to eat as a species and as a people. And it's something that can literally reverse diseases and, get rid of all these toxins that are causing these diseases. And it's something that I've seen work in real world practice with real patients repeatedly, hundreds of times, thousands of times. And so it's something like I want people to know about this. And so my whole goal is really just to disseminate that knowledge. And whether that's on you, I think YouTube's a great platform for that. Instagram works very well as well. And that's sort of the thing is, I want to build that up as much as I can, simply because I'm reaching more people. And so the more people that are subscribed to me, the more people that are watching my show, the more this information is getting out there. And I'm not doing that. I'm not trying to sell a product. I'm not trying to, I have a day job. I like my day job, and it pays a lot more than YouTube does. So, I'm not trying to make this as a career. I really just want to get this information out there. And so the best way I can do that is the way I'll do it right now. It's YouTube and Instagram. Those seem to be where people are getting a lot of traction. And so I want to just keep making videos and keep having interviews with people that are interesting. It allows me to meet people like yourself and others around the world who I think, add, very good, add their voice very well to this argument. And it just building up this preponderance of evidence that this is good for people and that this is what we should do. So that's really what I want to do, is just try to get this out to as many people as possible so they can better their lives.
Yeah, you've got the same sort of view as me. So I've recently hit 1,000 subscribers, and everyone's like, "Oh, nice. When are you going to get 100K? When are you going to get 1 million?" I'm like, that's not necessarily the goal. If I'm getting 100K subscribers, but I'm just shouting at a camera, putting out misinformation and not being truthful to people, I'm not really helping anyone. It's not going to do anything. So people like yourself, me, Bart Kay, Dr. Ken Berry, Sean Baker, everyone putting out these sort of factual content videos that are going to help people. Enough of that goes round, this will be a solidified community where people are going to garner so much information and facts, and it's going to help so many more people. So that's your passion project, is my passion project. So that's what I'm really working towards as well.
Yeah, well, that's awesome. And the more people, like you and I out there, I think the better. I think there just should be, thousands and thousands and thousands of voices out there saying, hey, this really works, and this works for me, and this is what the evidence is. And the more people that can just send that out and have bigger and bigger platforms, I think that's great. I want as many people in this space as possible. You got thousands of like vegan influencers and things like that, and they have a lot of followers and they have a lot of influence. And so we need that too. We need to build this side of the argument as well, and then people can take a look. They can look at their argument, they can look at our argument, and they can decide for themselves. And that is what is supposed to happen. But the discussion should be made, and the arguments should be out there for people to look at, so that they can have all the available information and just make a choice for themselves. I don't want anybody to do what I'm doing just because I'm doing it. I want people to look at what we're all doing, and then make a decision what's best for their lives.
Yeah, it's great advice. I won't take any much more of your time. Appreciate you coming on today. It's been great and really informative and valuable. So I appreciate you coming onto my little small, humble YouTube channel and talking about different topics.
No, it's all good, man. It's a pleasure. Yeah, thank you for having me on. It's been a lot of fun.
Brilliant.